I'll just say to the person, hey, I'm a good guy. Do you have a good guy discount? And okay, hang on. So this is not nearly as funny for the listener.
This is an audible format.
Well, here we are.
We've never left, Lou.
It's getting kind of like we need some maid service in here.
I mean, I enjoy pizza as much as the next guy, maybe a little more than the next guy, but I'd really like to eat a vegetable. We've been in this studio. I mean, the work we do, I mean, if you can call this work, but the work we do for the Lunatics is really outrageous.
I'd say particularly based on the compensation we're getting for this kind of work.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate that 50% raise.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, being a math major, I'm happy to, you know what? I'm going to double that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. This is live on air.
This is so great.
Yeah.
Think of the pizza we can afford on my new salary.
What a terrific
Of
performance. What a performance review.
Woo.
It only took 20-ish episodes. I don't know. We stopped counting intentionally.
It must have been that great best of reel that I helped produce.
Mm-hmm. Our crack research team really dug into the archives to put together that 7 seconds of dead air.
I can't tell you how long that took me. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
It was longer than 7 seconds, which doesn't say much for my productivity.
Well, that does remind me that I would like to introduce the show. This is the hotlou Show, and I am your host, Louis Ramowski, or somewhat lazily referred to as hotlou.
And speaking of segues, I am Mike Franklin, Hotlou's sidekick and dad joke artist.
Well, and speaking of other more segues, I tried to layer on top of that, but yeah, we need to work on our improv bits.
Yeah, that wasn't a great attempt, Lou.
No, it wasn't. But I did want to point out that I recently got a message from somebody we hadn't heard from since high school.
Yeah.
That's a big fan of the show, but they listen on Google Play.
Okay.
And I've just learned that Google Play does not have ratings on your podcast.
Really?
Yeah. So
I don't appreciate their communist universe where excellent podcasts aren't distinguishable from sort of mediocre ones.
yeah, so we need to talk to Larry Page, celebrity listener, Larry Page. And
Yeah,
Sergey.
Larry, I'm sure he's listening.
Yeah, he's got to be listening. He's been listening since like episode 2 or 3.
Yeah, he's right here on the Luxicon.
Yeah, right near the top. And somehow, some way has launched a podcast listening app without the ability to rate the podcasts people are listening to.
That's ridiculous.
So in lieu of rating the hotlou Show, 5 stars on Google Play, I'm going to recommend that you recommend you being the listener, not you being Hot Mike number 3.
Or you being Larry Page?
Yeah,
Pronouns, Lou.
Yeah. Let's speak to all 3 yous. So Mike, Larry, listener.
It's the worst sheep ever.
The lambs out there listening. Instead of rating it 5 stars, invite a friend to listen.
Oh, that's a great idea. That's a good thing you could do in lieu of a rating, as you pointed out.
Mm-hmm. I would say that even for those who can rate it 5 out of a total of 5 stars, maybe it's worth telling a friend about the hotlou Show.
What's this maybe garbage?
Yeah, I was trying to make it
worth
subtle. Okay, let's back up, rewind the tape.
How about both and?
Yeah, so we rewind the tape a little bit, and we say, you should rate us 5 stars, and you should tell a friend about the hotlou Show.
100%.
Okay.
As the icon says.
So up until this point, we've been talking about a handful of the social experiments that I have done on social media, digitally, kind of elsewhere. We've talked to a couple of people and interviewed them. I think we've talked about some business lessons, some product lessons, and these have all been kind of firsthand. But in the last week, I read one of the most fascinating social experiments that I've ever heard of.
Okay.
That is probably repeatable for everybody listening here. But I will say, I don't know that it's applicable to running an organization or doing any sort of digital marketing, or how we fit into whatever theme we may have had or not had at this point. So I wanted to share this really brief, crazy social experiment I read
And
about.
so far, on-air production meeting, so far, I am not even aware of what he's about to share.
No.
So this is going to be, I am basically a lunatic today.
And I should probably have reread the social experiment leading into this, given that every time I do the show notes and I go back and review these things, I seem to have recalled a bunch of fine details incorrectly. But let's get it close enough that, I love to say that all work and no plagiarism makes a really boring story. So we're going to take a little bit of liberties. We're going to add a little bit of plagiarism to this and see if we can apply it to this social experiment.
I'm game. Hey, by the way, too, let me just put in a plug for the show notes. Lou puts a lot of work into the show notes. So if you haven't been checking out the show notes, you're basically a freeloader.
Oh, I like this. I wasn't aware that Hot Mic number 3 was reading the show notes.
Oh, I haven't missed an episode.
Fantastic.
It's my third favorite thing to do.
I will say that what I often intend to do is spend about 15 to 20 minutes putting into the show notes, and 2 hours into it, I'm like fact-checking myself, adding additional links, linking through, and doing a bunch of stuff. So.
Your work shows.
Oh, fantastic. I'm waiting for the first weird Google search term that comes back, like Jeff Goldblum loves camels or something like that. We haven't had anything quite like that yet, but I'm sure it's going to come.
It's unavoidable.
It could be as a result of this episode and this weird social experiment, because I think we've all been in the scenario where we're in, and I'll say that as a podcast host and someone who, admittedly likes to talk, that I have socially sensed sometimes that I'm just talking somebody's ear off and they are just ready to go.
The cues aren't obvious, Lou. You haven't let me leave the studio.
They're lewd out. They're hot lewd out, and they want to walk away. And often I'll give them the out when I can kind of pick up on it, but I'll notice occasionally that, I'm just kind of going on and on with the story, and the person's looking for an out, and I give it to them. But I think we've all been in that kind of scenario where the person we're talking with is just going on, and we don't have any method to escape. And this social experiment that I read about last week was just this guy on Reddit talking about a couple of different ways that he tries to make those scenarios fun. And so the first one was pretty funny, and it was an experience that I'm not really that familiar with, or at least I'm familiar with, but hasn't happened to me in a long time. And maybe you've been on the other side of this, but as a potential door knocker and promoting and campaigning, you're going door to door, and that I just haven't had a lot of people door knock for me, and who knows how long.
You mean come to your house?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not buying a lot of vacuums. You're good with life insurance.
I don't know. The last time
is out in California where he belongs to be.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
And what this Redditor talked about was when somebody's standing there, instead of actually just saying no and trying to get them to go away, that you open up the door wide, and then as the conversation goes on and on, try to keep them engaged and slowly close the door as slowly and imperceptibly as possible.
All I can think about is Homer Simpson fading into the bush.
Exactly.
That is so awesome.
And then the idea is to actually get the door completely shut without ever closing the conversation.
Imagine the speed at which you'd have to close the. I mean, the key you used is imperceptible.
Exactly.
I mean, so you're having to really calculate in your head, how much can I get away with here?
Yep.
Bit by bit. This. I really want to try this.
I do too, and I haven't
door knock me, Democrats.
I haven't had an opportunity to do this yet, because nobody's knocking on my door. But he did mention how what he really enjoyed the most out of this is getting the door completely shut and then walking over to the window and just peering out of the window and watching the person just in utter confusion.
Oh my God, this sounds like so much fun. I 100% am going to try this at some point in my life.
Yeah. So, the conversation went on in Reddit. And, like you said, I think a bunch of people were like, this is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
Well, because you change the scenario. I mean, it's look, where you stand depends on where you sit, or where you sit depends on what. Anyway, everything is relative. That scenario where you're really just desperate, and you're in your own home, which is what makes it worse. You can't even get away from this conversation in your own home. Now you've turned it into a game.
Exactly. So you've turned, and maybe that's the lesson for today, is to take these like painful moments in life that are kind of hard to escape and create your own fun little game for yourself.
I can even see doing this like, and I'm not, I know some of my coworkers listen to the show, but there are times when I'm in the middle of something really important, like for a paying client or a fantasy football team. And I'm really not interested in the conversation we're having right now. And I go through all of the social motions to try to convey that I am interested, which doesn't feel like a game. I got to think of a way to gamify that situation.
So here's the answer.
Oh,
yeah.
Have I predicted something else?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as the conversation went on in Reddit, people were saying, I want to apply this to my life somehow. And what you're talking about is one of those perfect scenarios where I think everybody's experienced this. They're in the middle of some sort of important and or urgent project, and a coworker just steps up like it's your job to give them attention.
Yeah.
And you don't know when they're going to leave.
Right.
And it's a little bit of a challenge. So what one Redditor suggested was that instead of closing the door on somebody, slowly.
Because unlike the first scenario, you've got to live with that.
Right.
The first scenario, that person, you're probably never going to see that person again.
Right.
Or at least if you see them, it's not going to be awkward that you slam the door in their face very slowly. I got to work with these people, so I don't want to hurt their feelings. You know, I'm trying to be a nice guy.
There's a social contract there, and I will say that at some point at 8th Bridge, and we had, a wide open office, and we had tons of developers, and often, being a developer, that continuing your focus and concentration on whatever problem you have, like having a 30-second interruption can turn back your productivity like 15 or 30 minutes sometimes.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And we kind of had this unwritten rule that don't interrupt the developers unless it was in this quadrant of important things and urgent things. And if it was important and urgent, then you could interrupt them. If it was urgent but not important, you couldn't. If it was important but not urgent, you waited. Mm-hmm. And it was that, it was that simple. And I love that. And
what if it was neither urgent nor important?
I can't remember what we did there.
Don't leave the participle dangling, Lou.
Yeah, there was certainly at least one employee who did not follow that rule. And I'd say not important and not urgent was often his or her interruption. And tool I would have loved to use with that person was, rather than closing the door on them, what one Redditor suggested was start with talking to them with your mouth shut and slowly as you can open your mouth and see how wide you can make it before they say anything.
Oh, that's like full on horror movie. That's almost like slamming the door. Like that's going to leave, that's a negative sanction on your relationship.
It could.
I'm trying to do it. I could almost eat the whole microphone, but I did that very quickly. So it's the same principle as the door. Like you're just opening your mouth very slowly. Mm-hmm. And at some point, your conversation partner is going to look over and realize that person's got a gaping maw.
Has their mouth been that open the entire conversation?
Maybe he's always doing that. Is he yawning?
So flipping the social contract on these people that are unable to hold their end of the bargain of the social contract is kind of the foundational principle of this social experiment.
Yeah. No. I'm going to give this some thought because candidly, I have been, as you point out, I have been on both sides of this. Mm-hmm. I know, and to me, there's no worse feeling than picking up on the social clue that this story is not wanted at this time. Mm-hmm. And I am not the kind of person that's willing to give up on a good story. So I will just keep on talking. Mm-hmm. I'm going to see that's because you just wait. Eat your vegetables. You don't know where this is going, but it's awesome.
Yeah. Sometimes I do that just for the practice to try to either reel them back in or to see if I'm telling the story really poorly and next time I can do a better job.
Right.
So I'd say a non-compliant audience, I'm trying to turn them into a compliant one.
I think not that you would know this in every instance for sure, or even maybe a majority of instances, but the trick there is so much of the time it has nothing to do with you. You know, you don't know what's going on in their head. Maybe they have
Exactly.
a sick kid or cat or
Right.
something, and all of a sudden, you know, God, I'm just trying to get out of here and yada yada yada. And that's that you don't that has nothing to do with your story. They might have
Right.
20 minutes ago, they might have had a perfectly good
Yeah.
attention span. But there is the lesson to distill there is pick up on these social cues. I mean, in person, we usually a show about, you know, sort of social media.
Right.
These are really interpersonal,
Sure.
in physical conversations. Pick up on those social cues. And if you're the person that sort of continues to suffer from them, find a way to make it bearable because it's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
I got to think about this mouth open. There's got to be another way.
Well,
That one just seems obscene to me. but
yeah. As we're talking about this, a couple of weird things that I've done in my life that I think we can dedicate an entire show to something called the Good Guy Discount that I've tried a handful of times. And briefly as a teaser, often if I order something at a restaurant or, you know, a coffee shop, I'll just say to the person, "Hey, I'm a good guy. Do you have a good guy discount?" And okay, hang on. So this is not nearly as funny for the listener.
This is an audible format.
Okay. Mike just attempted the mouth widening thing on me.
I didn't really attempt it as much as I kept doing it. I was committed to it. And then I just went, I'm just going to go for it.
And, you know,
I opened my mouth as far as I could.
as now a victim of this social experiment,
It's weird.
I thought you were amazed with the story.
It's a double backfire.
It was.
Oh my God.
Oh, my God.
I got my mouth about halfway open
Yeah.
without you realizing what was going on. And then I just decided because it's an audible medium, as I
Yep.
continue to remind ourselves
Oh,
that
my
I'd
goodness.
lose. Okay, maybe I will try this.
Okay. Well, that.
Because I bet I had another 40% before you would have caught on. You thought I was just fascinated by the
I
good guy
did.
discount.
I did. I thought as your mouth was getting open, more and more open, you were more and more impressed with the story.
Give me the good guy discount. So,
I mean, that's the teaser, but we're going to dedicate a whole episode to that because I think it's an important full story and kind of philosophy
Got it.
that I apply to life. But in terms of how you might apply this to like closing off a conversation is two things that I've tried in public to just see what it's like, just to break these like unwritten social conventions is I have just seen if I've had the guts to just lay down in like a public setting, just flat on my back, and to see if anybody would say anything. And
it's a bold move, Cotton.
I can imagine doing that at the office to see if your, let's say, coworker Chris would even say anything if you're just slowly sliding out of your chair and eventually we're just laying on the ground.
That's the Homer Simpson. Because like
It is.
eventually, I mean, you're just sort of slouching in your seat, and then eventually,
Yeah.
I could see a scenario where you don't really, because these little, if you do it slow enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
they won't necessarily catch on.
Maybe not. Well,
Ugh.
I just wanted to share that like fascinating thing because it's very rare instance, as I'm sure you're familiar with. You're reading something on the internet and you completely lose your mind laughing.
Oh yeah.
And that's what this was. It was like it was probably after midnight. I'm just cruising on my phone on Reddit, and I must have laughed for 40 minutes straight.
The door thing is just unbelievable. Like I
Yeah.
really, really can't wait for an opportunity to present itself for that.
Yeah,
Like the census is coming up, and I'm very hopeful
Oh,
that
right.
this is such a thing.
for sure. In a smaller town like Jordan, Minnesota, there's probably opportunities for that
Oh yeah,
too.
the the government will come and ask me who lives in my house.
Nice. All right. Well, maybe your wife or kids can get in on the action too. That'd be funny to hear.
I just don't want them to know how many.
Yeah. There we go. Well, I wanted to share that story, and you know, if you as a listener are out there, or as a billionaire celebrity listener, wanting to experiment with this, or maybe even update your app to include ratings, Larry,
if that is your real name.
We'd love to hear from you and hear if there's a social experiment you're doing out there that's either hilarious or applicable or some way to apply to your life. So that's all we've got for today. But I wanted to thank everybody for listening, and reach out and rate us 5 stars and or tell a friend.
Out of 5 stars. And it's really and, not or.
Yeah. Do all of those things, as Shayla once told us as a former guest on this show. So thanks again for listening. I am your host, Hot Lou.
I am still Mike.
We'll talk to you next Lou's Day.